Let's bring in the Liberal Senator Kerrynne Liddle now, joins me from Adelaide. Thank you for your time. Let's start with the speculation, yes. Senator Liddle. There's been some talk about you as a possible replacement for Julian Leeser. Would you be keen to take on the job as Shadow Minister for Indigenous Australians?
Well, look, I came into this role from working in a range of sectors at significant leadership level over a number of years, and I've always held the belief that you can contribute to improving the lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people through a whole range of approaches, and Indigenous affairs is not the only one. So I would be saying that's a decision for Peter Dutton, and I'm focused on prosecuting my work as a Senator for South Australia, but also the committee work that I am participating in that is really critically important.
It would be critically important, though, this role now, wouldn't it? Just months out from this referendum in probably October later this year. So it would be a pivotal role for the opposition.
It is a pivotal role to fill, but it's also important that that role has the right person with the right skills and abilities and the commitment to do the work in this area. And I just want to be really clear. I have a great relationship with my coalition colleagues. I'm not unprepared to speak up in the range of forums that I have access to. So regardless of whatever the outcome is, I will be a significant contributor to the discussion and bringing some reality to some of the complex issues based on my lived and professional experience.
You're concerned about the proposed voice. What worries you?
Well, I think what's really important is understanding where the priorities areas are. I go back to, and you mentioned just before, Alice Springs. The Pyjara family in Alice Springs was an issue that I raised, a family that had been living on a concrete slab for nearly 2 years. It still took the Australian government talking to the Northern Territory government about a month to get those people off the slab. We're talking children, we're talking about 3 generations of people. It required a lot of work from parliamentarians, and it still requires a lot of work because they're not in permanent housing yet. And you have to recircle back constantly to bureaucrats who told me and the Minister and her colleagues one thing, but I understood the opposite to be true. So it requires people to be focused on these issues, to continue to focus on these issues. And, regardless of where you sit in the House, these are important issues to be focused on.
Will you actively campaign for a no vote in the campaign for the referendum, or does it depend on whether you are appointed the Shadow Minister for Indigenous Affairs?
I think my focus on the moment is the committee work that is going to start tomorrow, and that's a really important process because we've been asking for detail for quite some time, and what this process now allows us to do is take a piece of information, which are the proposed 3 sentences that form the words for the Constitution, and interrogate that in a really concerted, detailed way to understand the implications, unintended or otherwise, on not just the Parliament, but also the government and also any other agencies that might be affected by the wording, including whether that satisfies those Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who wanted to be heard in the Constitution.
Are you worried, though?
Really clear about
are you worried this would be lost? This opportunity will be lost if recognition is not achieved in this referendum?
Well, I just want to be really clear. What the opposition has supported is recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in the Constitution. And I struggle to recall, even before I came into Parliament, anybody who has said to me that that's not a reasonable thing to do. What is being proposed by the opposition is that regional and local voices are heard but are not embedded, that framework is not embedded within our Constitution. We've said yes to a referendum going ahead, going to the people, which is really important. And the thing I'll be focused on is making sure, through this committee work and through the conversations I will have, that all of the information is available for Australians to make the right decision, because it's not simply about ticking a box and believing because you've ticked a box that you're on the right side of history, or that you're not in the party of the Undertaker, that you're actually making a decision based on fact and having the most detail available to you to make a decision. Because this is 96% of the Australian population who are not identifying as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, making a very important decision.
Is it fair to say that you haven't finalised where you would vote at this stage? Are you still open to be convinced if the government were to amend some of the language?
I have had concerns even before coming into Parliament about the proposition that we now have that was put to the Australian public. We now have, only a matter of weeks ago, the actual words that are being put. So my focus is going to be on understanding the implications of the word, because what we have currently in front of us does not just have implications for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, it has implications for Australians, for our institutions, and that's what I'll be focused on in the next couple of weeks.
You were born in Alice Springs. Mr Dutton's calling for the AFP to be deployed. How urgent is it?
Well, when you talk to some families in Alice Springs, and I go back to the Pyjara family, who are non-gamblers, non-drinkers. One of them had been, I found out yesterday, because I maintain contacts and circle back and check out what's going on, had been on the housing list for 12 years, another family member for 8, another family member for 7. They have slipped through every single service delivery dysfunction crack that is available. So I've been imploring the government to look at this not as an individual case, but look at this from a case of a fractured, unintegrated failure of service delivery that led to this family living in plain sight on that concrete slab for 2 years. This is a miracle
wouldn't the Voice
that this
help
family
fix that
maintained
sort of
hope
issue?
in the Australian public. Well, I think it's incumbent on politicians, policymakers, service providers, mainstream providers to actually take a stake and be accountable. What's missing in all of this is the accountability. Who is actually responsible for getting those people off the slab and allowing them, because they've got a house, to actually take control of their own lives? They have the capacity to do it. It's about somebody actually advocating on their behalf. Now, this is an individual family, right? But you have to understand that they were living in plain sight and a lot of people were just driving past. It takes people to actually take an interest and be accountable for participating in helping these people change their own lives. Because they had hope. They were sending their children from this concrete slab to school. The school-aged children were going to school. I saw it for myself. And so we as Australians, all Australians, need to make sure that whatever mechanism is in place is going to address the concerns where it has the greatest impact and where it matters the most.
Senator Liddle, I know that you did travel to Ceduna and the areas affected when the cashless debit card was made voluntary. Have things improved since that decision was taken by Amanda Rishworth, the Minister?
Well, the statistics will tell you that things haven't improved. And in amongst there, sometimes there are seasonal factors that impact that, but that is not the only factor that's impacted the evidence that's available. I've seen the evidence in South Australia, the police reports that have come out. There are a whole range of factors, but in the Northern Territory, the ground zero for that was the removal of the alcohol restrictions without a proper framework and the lack of willingness of the Northern Territory government, who lauded this change as being about human rights. And I said at the time, whose rights are they actually talking about? It's not the women and children and the men that are affected by this. When I was on the committee that looked at the implications of this, we heard the medical doctor from the Alice Springs Hospital talk about the police bringing more people to the emergency ward than the ambulance. We talked to these people in that setting, in the public setting, about women and children rocking up at the Alice Springs Hospital because they needed somewhere safe to hide at night. You need to be talking directly to people on the ground in these regional and remote areas and in other areas of Australia where there are, from time to time, issues about what is going to make the greatest difference. And I still argue it's not just about money. It's about accountability of those people that already have responsibilities to deliver the services in a way that reaches the people who are the least powerful in this entire process.
Liberal Senator Kerrynne Liddle, thanks for your time. And just to clarify before you go, if offered the job, you would take it as Shadow Indigenous Affairs Minister? You'd like it?
I haven't had any discussions about the job, and I'm focused on my job as a Liberal Senator for South Australia.
Senator, thanks for your time. We'll talk to you soon.